Forum Borealis. Paradigm Expansion.
Greetings from the north and welcome to Forum Borealis and a brand new show in our esoteric philosophy series. Now, the jack of all trades, that is our guest today, is Robert Bonomo, a filmmaker, photographer, blogger, novelist, financial and political analyst, tarot reader and practicing esoterist. His background is equally manifold after acquiring graduate degrees from the University of Florida and Boston University, and having lectured at universities in Spain and China. He's had an extensive career in marketing and advertising, having worked among other for the World Wildlife Fund, UPS, Galeries Lafayette, Porsche and Antevenio. Despite his successful professions, he had a change of heart, fed up with spending his energy on convincing thousands of people to buy things they don't really need or want, and decided to pick up pen and paper and begin writing. A few novels emerged along the way, all three who are available as free downloads on Smashwords. First, Twilight Breakout in 2009, then the dystopian Cactus Land the same year, and his latest release in 2012, Your Love Incomplete, which is structured upon the tarot symbolism. Being multilingual, it's no wonder he has lived and worked all around the world, like in the San Francisco Bay Area, Miami, New York, Valencia and Madrid in Spain, Luang in China, Buenos Aires in Argentina, Cartagena in Colombia, Kamchatka in Russia, the last few years in Andorra, and as this is being released, now also in Tunisia in Northern Africa, where he is running a school. Having worked many of these places as a teacher, even giving online classes, he has coupled this experience with his passion for esoterica and started to give online tarot seminars as well as readings. He has also presented his work in various conferences like Occulture in Berlin. His presentations has also turned into instructional and documentary movies, like the 2-year production released in 2018 called The 21 Faces of God, a presentation of the major arcana Archetypes. And currently he is working upon his new movie, due for release autumn 2019, called Twilight of the Archons, which will cover the financial, cultural and spiritual web of control and offer some ways out. Robert Bonomo, who is a late-blooming anarcho-libertarian, is consequently blogging on all sorts of topics like astrology, zombies, Ron Paul and cats, among other things. His prediction of the gold value was mentioned in Market Watch. Ron Unz included Bonomo's work in the Unz Review, and he has had his articles published in some of the leading old and new media sites, including Business Insider, Culture, Lew Rockwell, Infowars, Global Research, The Occidental Observer, Activist Post, Rense, What Really Happened, Counterpunch, Information Clearinghouse, Pravda, Rinf Alternative News, The Waking Times, Astrological News Service and The Mountain Astrologer. Robert is naturally also a frequent guest on podcasts and talk radio. Some of his guest appearances include The Higher Side Chats, Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio, Grimerica, Where Did the Road Go, Freeman TV, Eschaton, or maybe it's pronounced Eschaton, The Outer Limits of Inner Truth, Lighting the Void, My Alchemical Bromance, and of course Alex Sakiri's legendary Skeptico, where I first heard Robert. And since the forum is unbreaking news, lost on everything, sweeping up what the others left behind, we now have him on to complete the circle. Here you are. Welcome to Forum Borealis, Robert.
Thanks for having me on. I'm a big fan of the show.
Excellent. And after I discovered you, I've become a fan of you too. And you know, I told you in one of our mails that I've listened to you without knowing it was you. It was the show you did with Alex over at Skeptico.
Oh, right, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And you did politics there.
Right, it was right after the election.
Right, and I don't know what you're most famous for, but certainly you have something to offer in that department. So to the listeners, I just want to say I've booked Robert for a separate session, because I like to go deep and I don't want to mix too many branches. You know, you can't ride two horses at the same time, they say. So today, Robert, we're going to ride the esoteric horse.
Excellent.
And next time, let's do politics.
Great.
Yeah, and I just want to give you the heads up that I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm an anarchist, but I'm leaning in that direction.
I've listened to a lot of your shows, and I think our politics are pretty much on the same level.
Yeah, which is kind of boring, actually. I wish there was some. I hope we find some disagreements because, you know, thesis, antithesis, synthesis.
I'm sure we'll find something to argue about.
Yeah,
I'm
see.
Half Irish, so I'm always looking for a fight somewhere.
Right. But you know, not for the sake of bickering, but for the sake of pushing forward to a higher Erkenntnis, as the Germans say.
Yeah, and I'm not a strict libertarian. I used to be, but now I'm kind of having my doubts. So I'm sort of in one of these weird political places where I'm not exactly sure where I am, which is kind of fun too. I'm not locked in like I used to be.
No, and that's where I'm liminal too, but I'm deliberately liminal. Kill me if I marry one particular. I mean, any intelligent person should pick and choose from anywhere. It's not natural for people to be lockstep on questions like these. You know what Ron Paul says? He says, coalition, yes. Compromise, no. The minute you compromise, you're selling out.
Absolutely.
Your principle. But you can coalite with anyone and everyone that you agree with, and that's how society is pushed forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he was one of my heroes.
Yeah, mine too. But I have heroes all over the place. So anyway, so that would be exciting. And the only thing that gets my blood boiling is, I wouldn't say politics, but I would say war. Questions like war and stuff like that. People say to me, oh, you're so mellow. Oh, you never get angry. No, it's totally alien for me to be upset about someone else's opinion, someone else's values, someone else's views. I think that's a kind of an insanity. People are too attached to their mentality when they do that instead of their own real idea. How people can be identified with some with their bodies, some with their emotions, and some with their thoughts. But when it comes to important questions like war, torture, freedom, whatever, that's when my blood is boiling. So I'm going to do more political shows this year, and I did one on Syria.
Oh, you did? Interesting.
Yeah, it's not out yet, but if people think I normally don't shut up, oh my God, they have to brace themselves for that one. So, but today I was thinking we could do symbolism and, of course, also with a heavy emphasis on tarot and archetypes. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. And more specifically, you have this great movie out. You did me the disfavor of sending me the short version. I didn't know there was a long version, but then fortunately I discovered it.
Oh, right.
It's called 21 Masks of God. And sentient people out there will already have picked up that it implies tarot. So today I think we should discuss occult symbology, archetypes, and also especially tarot.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's a topic that I've spent many years sort of getting deeper and deeper. And it really, it's a well that seems to, you can go as deep as you want.
Exactly. Now, before we start getting into the profound, let's start with, because you're our first time guest here, let's just do the ritual, which is interesting for people who don't know you too. How did you get into the area of esoterics?
Yeah, I think it all began when I was a teenager. I had a sort of a difficult period, and I came from a very Catholic family. So my mother sent me to meet a priest who is also a Jungian analyst.
Oh, wow.
But trained in Switzerland.
Right.
And, the old school kind of, Jungian analyst. And I think it all began there because he really introduced me to Jung. And then from Jung, once you kind of, when you're 16, 17, I started reading Jung. It really changed, I think, the whole way I looked at things.
Yeah.
And then, I think like a lot of people, you drift out of Catholicism, but Jung kind of always stays there. I went to the more Eastern sort of thinking. But then like a lot of people, at some point, I felt like I had to come back into the Western tradition. And I even remember there's an interview somewhere where Jung talks about when he was in India, he didn't want to meet. I can't remember who it was. I'm not sure. Maybe it was the Maharishi. Mm-hmm. But it was almost like you have to stay, in the Western tradition. And alchemy has always been something that's fascinated me.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to be able to have a feel for it. I remember as a kid reading these books on alchemy. I had no idea what I was reading.
Been there, done that.
Yeah, I mean, you pick up Aeon when you're 21, and, it's not easy reading.
No, it's like, who dropped acid in my cup,
Totally. It's almost unreadable.
Right.
But, and you know what helped me with that was Edward Edinger, who is a Jungian, who has a lot of lectures on Aeon and on the Mysterium. Mm-hmm. And I think it was through Edinger that I really started to kind of really, get a feel for it at least.
Okay, so yeah, that's a good starting point. I want to say regarding the Eastern and Western thing, it's a very old conundrum. And some are very, like Rudolf Steiner was very, after his theosophical experience, he was very on the Western, and Jung too. But I had a mentor of sorts. He said it's pretty easy, simple. I mean, because it's not about, which one is best or anything like that. It's about when you grow up in a culture, you have a lot of, I'll say, spiritual or occult influence subconsciously. It's just there in our language. It's there in our mythology. It's there above else in symbolism. Norwegian, English, Spanish, Italian, you name it. Those languages are so ingrained with Greek and Latin and also other sorts of influences, and very often it goes back to spiritualist or occult roots.
Yeah.
And so he said his point was, sure, you can be a Tibetan Buddhist or whatever, but it's so hard if you've grown up in the Western culture to really penetrate, because it's not about, and that's where the academics go wrong and the intellectuals go wrong. It's not about understanding intellectually these things. That it has its part, obviously, but it's much deeper if we're not just going to write a dissertation about this. We're going to actually live it as living, breathing esotericians. Then we have to integrate it into our being, and our being is built up, if you're born in the West, by entirely different building blocks. than if you were born in the East. So it will be equally hard for the Easterner who's grown up in that culture to, go into some Western approach.
Mm-hmm.
That's all. And at the end of the day, we're all going to the top of the same mountain. It's just that the mountain has a million paths at the beginning. And the higher we come, he said this too, the higher you go, the more all the different tracks will dwindle into, just 4 different eventually. North, south, east, west. And only when you are at the top, you'll see clearly all of them. But who gets to the top? And so it's much better to take the easy road, which would be the road that you're influenced on subconsciously. So that's the reason I too emphasize more the Western approach than the Eastern. But I do obviously seek for useful stuff here and there to substantiate whatever view I have, and the Eastern has much to offer.
Sure.
But I would never devote myself fully to that path. It would be too much of I would have too much of a starting at disadvantage, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually lived in Luoyang in China, which was where Lao Tzu was actually working most of his life. And I knew I met some Taoist monks. And to try and penetrate what they were saying to me would have taken maybe 10 years of studying Chinese. And then remember, Chinese it's contextually very different than Western languages. So to actually have any idea what they were talking about would take such an effort that it, like you say, it's just a lot easier to go deep, I think, in our own tradition. And
it doesn't help that they're talking in riddles either.
Oh my God. And remember, everything they say to you is contextual with who's there, the moment. It's not so low context like, say, American English. Yeah. So it is a riddle. But I was thinking about this today. It's interesting how Buddhism, the origins of Buddhism are Aryan. I mean, we come from the same origin, but it moved east.
Yeah.
What if it had moved west?
Well, some say, the shamanic origin to Tibetan Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
I know you're aware of Peter Kingsley.
Yes.
Yes.
Very much.
And he's one of those who's emphasizing the shamanic influence from the East on the ancient Greek esoteric traditions. You have Abaris, who was an Avarian, which means he came from the Altai area. So some say you have that impulse coming west, and then you have it also in the East transformed into Tibetan Buddhism. But you were more talking of later pure Buddhism, right?
Yeah, exactly. And just how it became, how it really kind of moved into China, eventually found its way to Japan, and it took on a very, very Confucian there was a strong Confucian flavor, especially to Zen, no? But it's just interesting. I was just thinking, imagine if there had been a school that had moved west, what would it have looked like? And I think that's one of the appeals now. You see, there's a strong appeal, the Buddhist appeal. I think it's probably one of the most appealing traditions to most people today.
Yeah, until they learn about his misogyny. But, that's interesting. Some people claim that Jesus, well, the chap who we call Jesus, that was obviously not his name, but the Nazarene, that he was initiated into or influenced by Buddhist sources. Now, hard to tell, but what we do know is that there was full exchange between the Middle East and the Orient back in that day. People were traveling back and forth. I mean, Thomas Church in India and all that stuff.
Right.
The Silk Road was open, so impulses have been exchanged no matter if the religion per se didn't be exported. And we were talking about Pythagoras. I mean, he lived 20 years in Egypt, 10 years with the Zoroastrians. Some say he too went to India. And by the way, when you say Taoism and Buddhism and Pythagoras, consider this. I mentioned it in another show, but it's worth revisiting. What's the odds for about 500 BC You get three avatars on Earth at the same time. You have in the east, Tao, Lao Tse. You have in the middle, Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha. And you have in the west the chap known as Pythagoras, which was his title. And not only that, but if you go into the philosophy of these three impulses, you'll see it's so damn similar. It's what we could call nature philosophy. It's based upon nature. It's not based upon dogma. It's based upon natural laws like numbers.
Exactly.
That's what we'll get to today, right? Symbols and numbers and all that stuff. So three impulses at the same time, more or less with the same philosophy. Of course, there's cultural and linguistic and some symbolic differences and all that stuff. The context is different. But if you go to the heart of it, the essence, I dare claim it's pretty similar. The solutions, pretty similar. The diagnosis of the world, pretty similar.
Yeah.
And you are a guy writing fiction. I'm not. But if I ever would write spiritual fiction, I've always thought I write a novel where those three chaps meet up in India.
That would be
that happened, but we don't know about it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I've even looked at the astrology of that period just to see what was going on.
Yeah.
And it's fascinating to look at the chart of that period around, 550 BC, around there.
Yeah.
The close to conjunction of Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto. So that's something I've always thought about. What an incredible moment that was.
Yeah.
And we really haven't left that in any significant way. I mean, I think if you look at Pythagorean thought, it's the foundation of all modern cosmology.
Yep. Indeed it is. That's pretty deep, and it will take a long time to unravel. But before, if we even go there, I want to direct us now to another starting point, actually.
Oh, okay.
Your movie, excellent movie, and the music you're using is beautiful, by the way. Good taste, man.
Thank you.
But you choose the tarot, and that's interesting because the tarot is pretty new, and now we've been musing about more original stuff. So why the tarot?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, actually, how I got into this was the last novel I wrote. I was looking for a narrative structure. So I thought, well, the tarot is more than just random archetypes. The order is important. So why don't I just use that order as a narrative structure? So I got deeper into it as a structure and a narrative path. And then when I was thinking, well, should I write a book on the tarot or a film on it? And, there are something about those archetypes in the tarot. And I'm not into this woo-woo spookiness that this comes from another planet or something. It's not what I'm into.
And you're not using it for divination either, I'm guessing.
Oh, I do. Actually, I do readings.
Oh, you do that? Okay.
Yeah, I do readings.
But you'll be the first to admit it has deeper values than just readings, right?
Oh, absolutely. And if we think about it on the level of three, I mean, God likes three. The bottom level of tarot is a card game. The second level is the divination. And the third level is what the path that it shows. And that's why I love about the tarot. Because
could we call the third one the transformation?
Yeah, the transcendent level. No?
Transcendence, yes.
And the tarot works on those three levels, on the body, on the soul, and on the spirit.
Right.
And so, in that medieval period, whoever came up with the 21 major arcana, they were picking the most powerful archetypes of that moment. And a lot of them go back to the Greeks. Some of them you might say were more Christian. And then there are a few that are actually just kind of that period of the late medieval period. But I think it's a fabulous collection of archetypes. And I think that's the main reason I chose it. I could have. Oh, go ahead.
No, go on.
I was just saying I could have maybe used the zodiac.
Right.
Make it the 12. It would have been the 12 faces of God. But something about the tarot and those images, and it gave me a little bit more room. So I picked the tarot. But the film, the people who really got the film understand the film is not about the tarot. If you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's a way to go somewhere.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah.
But would you say, let's stick a little to the more mundane aspects before we go deep. Would you say the Mantegna Tarocchi is an early manifestation of the tarot?
Yeah.
It's certainly influenced of Pythagorean thought, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And I could have gone that route. And maybe I might have. But the thing is, I wanted to pick something that resonated with modern people. And I didn't want to go, because the film I think is esoteric enough. So I wanted to pick something that was pretty simple and just delve deep into that.
And it's so visual. The subject is visual, so I think it's brilliant. And there's a million tarot books already anyway. So I think it's a brilliant move to make a film. I don't think there's many good films or documentaries about that subject. But how old? We have fragments here and there. We don't have complete decks of the oldest. But what can we date the oldest finds to?
Yeah, because you're right. There's not one complete Visconti deck. There are fragments in different areas. So as far as I can tell, it's 14. I've heard dates anywhere between like 1420 and 1460 in that area.
Right.
Somebody claims 1390. That would be, I think, the earliest you could get.
Well, if the 1300s, then I sense a temporal leak. If the Renaissance, then it was part of all the other stuff that was flooded out in that period from the East. Not really the East, but the Near East, the Byzantine revival.
Right.
But some say, the popular narrative is, well, there's that it comes from Egypt, and then it comes from gypsies. And there's other origin myths too. Do you have any particular view on that?
Stefan Heller, the Gnostic.
Yeah.
I like what he says. He says the fact that the myth brings it to Egypt is probably more important than if they actually came from Egypt. But the fact that we want to believe that, because I mean, if like we talked about, Pythagoras obviously spent time in Egypt, So that thought eventually works its way into medieval thought. So you could look at it mythologically, but now it is true that the actual first decks did come from Egypt, from the Mamluks, but those were plain decks and there was no major arcana in them. Those were just simple plain decks. And when those decks moved into Europe, then the major arcana were added as an additional level to the game.
Hang on, is the playing decks older?
Yes.
Than the...
Yes.
Okay, that's interesting.
And remember, it was a game that was played without the major arcana. So I believe there were 3 court cards. So it would have been, 52 cards.
Yeah, isn't that what we have today?
Yeah. Or
plus the jokers. Including the jokers.
Yeah, you'd have Jack, Queen, King. Exactly. It would be the same. And if you add the Joker you could consider to be major arcana.
yeah.
That's a bit of a stretch, I think.
Well, it's the gate,
Yeah.
You call the fool the representative of the liminal sphere, the zero. He's outside of time and space. He's the bridge between the here and now and the beyond. So if the major arcana is representative of the beyond, of the above, and the 4 elements, or the minor arcana is the world below, then it makes total sense.
Exactly, and that's how I see it. And 0, of course, as a number was something that was anathema, to the ancients. The idea of nothing. And so that's why that number is a little bit, it puts the fool in a strange place.
Yeah, the academicians claim they didn't have a concept of it, but I've discovered that's wrong. It's just that they didn't, it's a long debate, and we probably should take it in private, but they did have notions for it, even in ancient Greece.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I'll send you some references, very interesting, but it was like, it's like Arche. Arche is really cosmos sleeping. Whereas nous, or the monad, is cosmos awakening. So it's, if you see the symbol of 0 is just a circle, obviously you don't even need a circle, because as soon as you put you make a circle, then you're already limiting it. But they had to, if you're not putting anything, you can't even communicate it, right?
Right.
So at least let's put a circle, and then let's put a dot in the middle of the circle, so it becomes an eye. That's God awakening. That's the monad. That's the number one. That's when we have existence. So non-existence is per definition is a negation.
Right.
So
I got you.
that's
Yeah.
why you can't count on it. You can't use it practically until, of course, they discovered negative numbers and stuff like that. And that brought us the
I've
hell
never
of depth.
thought of it that way.
Pardon?
I really like that idea of the circle, and then the monad is when you put the point in the center.
Yeah.
Then it becomes the That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah. So, but we can go back to that in another instance. So, yeah, so we have then the tarot as a working system of archetypes, basically. Now, let's just indulge the less informed among our very informed audience. Let's define archetypes, or let's attempt it at least.
Yeah, it's I've tried to do this before, and it's difficult. I just think it's so much easier to just go directly and just say archetypes are really the Platonic forms.
Right.
And that's really what they are. And it's from those forms. Think of it as the DNA of the nous, no? Everything emerges from that. It's the music on the page before it actually becomes a sound wave.
Right.
It's the form. And it's from these forms that everything emerges. That's the material and the non-material. Everything emerges from these forms. And I think the origin of this obviously is the Pythagorean thought, and the ultimate archetype is number.
I agree. Even the scientists say that, if we encountered a creature from another, not just another planet, even another dimension, the only safe way to communicate with them would be through numbers.
And I've been thinking about this a lot lately. And, there are some mathematicians who believe that there are many maths. There's not one math.
Yeah, but math means, it comes from ancient Greek. It means thema means all subjects.
Right.
Thema. So thematic is the theme of all subjects. So inside of math is built in all dimensions, all aspects. But the materialists, they have this incredible infantile I wouldn't even call it understanding, the notion that man has invented math or numbers or the arithmetics. No, they discovered it. My cat knows the difference of me giving it one treat or two treats. A child understands.
Yeah.
It has two candies. You take one candy away from it, it realizes what's going on. You know what I mean? Basic.
Oh, absolutely. In crows, it's been proven that crows can count to, I believe it's 4.
Wow.
But it's very interesting. They get after 4, they can't count.
Interesting. And 4.
Yes, I believe it's 4. I could check, and it's a
Back
favorite.
to the minor arcana.
Yeah, and it's fabulous. It's a fascinating idea because they showed the crow knew it couldn't go into the barn until the men left because it would get shot.
Right.
So they went 4 in and 4 out, and then it flew in, but he couldn't count the last man. So they've actually studied this. It's fascinating. So number exists.
Yeah.
And, if you look at it from the physics level, I remember listening to Feynman once talk about how amazing it was that they could calculate spin on an electron, certain aspect of spin, to 15 decimal places. How could you have that level of accuracy? It boggles the mind. No. Yeah. So the materialist argument for that as number as an invention, I don't think it doesn't carry water.
No, and it's easily disproven. But the interesting thing with number is that it's, like you mentioned music, so and that can be boiled down to number too. I think it was Pythagoras who said that music is number in time, whereas geometry is number in space.
Exactly.
And then you have number in itself, and then you have a number in itself, which is arithmosophy, and then you have number in space and time, which is astronomy. But anyway, so the interesting thing with music is that you have the octave, right? You have 7 basic tones. Imagine the piano. You have 12, back to the zodiac, right? But you have 5 half and 7 wholes. So let's stick to the 7. And then you begin, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, do. And then you begin again on a new do. Do is the 8, so that's why it's called 8 octave, right?
Sure.
So it's repeating itself. And we call it, 1 octave, 2 octaves, 3 octaves, 4 octaves. And everything that vibrates basically have these 7 or 7 plus 5. You see it in colors, you see it in everything. Now, it goes maybe unlimited, but it goes far in each direction. But it's the same in numbers. You really basically just have 10 numbers. And that's if you include 0 as one of them. And then you have 1 to 9. And then the principle repeats itself, and it repeats itself and repeats itself. And we know this today. We know this in terms of what's called a holographic universe. We know that if you zoom deep, or the other way out, you'll see the same patterns. It's not exact same manifestations, but the principles are ingrained into, like fractals.
Exactly. And I mean, what are the chances that the ratios of the tetractys exactly fit to the harmony of music?
Right.
That's the key discovery of Pythagoras, because when you take those ratios and you see that they match physical material harmony, once you see that, it something snaps. It kind of clicks, and you say, "Oh my God, those archetypes. There is a bridge from those archetypes to the material world, and the first bridge is music." And that's the power of Pythagoras, to understand that. And from that, all civilization emerges.
Right. I have to give props to your home country, actually. America today is bankrupt in terms of culture, but Disney, of all things, had a wonderful illustration of these things, where they are explaining the Fibonacci sequence and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I know you know this because you used some of it.
And I use a section of that in the film.
The level that your culture had back then. This was for kids.
Yes.
And today even adults doesn't understand this stuff. Google it, people. Do you remember what it's called?
Just put in Disney Pythagoras.
Yeah.
And in my film, on the section of archetypes, I use about maybe 4 minutes, and it's a brilliant, and it's light and it's funny.
Yeah.
But when you really look at it and you say, how could this be? How could these numbers match physical harmony? And we should talk more. We could do this method, but we should mention the tetractys, because from the tetractys, I think everything emerges, at least cosmologically.
Okay. Let me just, people have no idea what that is. It's one of the most obscure symbols out there, and it's very hard to find any solid information on it. But let's just say it's the origin to the tree of life, the Kabbalistic Sephiroths. It's a system of 10 arranged dots in a triangle, basically, but it conceals so much. You could write 1,000 books about it and you'd only scratch the surface. It's a meditational tool more than anything. And like the tarot, it's a cosmology in and by itself, like the tarot, I'd say. But have you managed to match it? Because I regard the tetractys as the key to everything. The zodiac.
Yeah, everything.
Sorry, have you managed to tie it to tarot?
Well, not really, but it's directly connected to everything in astrology. So, for example, the monad is the conjunction. The 2 is the opposition, right? The trine is the 3, and the square is 4. So when I find it amazing if you ask most astrologers, what are the origins of the aspects, and like you mentioned before, music, right? The monad is it follows exactly from a fifth to a quarter note. No, so you've got the octave, right? I mean, it matches perfectly to music, to astrology. It's the origin of everything. Even if you look at the Big Bang Theory, where does that come from? And this is a very interesting question.
Well, the Indians have a similar notion from ancient times.
But in Western thinking, the fact that from the monad emerges energy and gravity,
right,
and then the whole thing. I mean, and I'm not trying to go, Deepak Chopra here, but I'm just saying that Western thinking is so embedded in the Tetractys, in everything we do. And I think actually a lot of modern physicists aren't aware of this. They're not aware of...
I beg to differ, because I've noticed that if you regard academia, you'll see that the most materialist people are in social sciences. Ironically, I've said this before. In fact, I said it when I talked with Alex. I said that for some weird reason, those who study the mind, psychology, are the most hardcore materialists, whereas those who study matter often, and again, like we began talking about Buddha, Lao Tzu, Pythagoras. I've noticed many top physicians, astrophysics, quantum physics, they're into Platonism, Neoplatonism, which basically is just a fancy modern word for Pythagoreanism.
Exactly.
Or they're into Buddhism, or they're into Taoism. And I don't think that's coincidental, because it depends what you're encountering, but you recognize, these are nature-based things, and I'm studying nature, and I'm seeing patterns that are similar. They're just using an archaic or poetic language, a magical language, to express the same thing I'm doing here with my, with my scientific tools. So no, I wouldn't diss too much the physicians. It depends. Of course, at the lower levels, you have all these brainwashed minions, but deep physic thinkers often have a spiritual outlook.
No, I guess I didn't mean it that way, because you're right. Okay. If you all of the serious mathematicians, all of them are Platonists.
Yep.
I mean, but I just meant that I watched a film on supersymmetry, and it's one of the potential models, for the standard model of physics. And if you look at the model of supersymmetry, I show this in the film, it matches exactly to the zodiac, but it's almost ridiculous. Like, I think somebody a little bit older would have looked at that and said, "Isn't that a zodiac?"
Right. Yeah, and you have this string theory with 10 strings, one for each sphere, in the Tetractys.
Yeah,
and then you say, what about the 11th? Well, there's an 11th implied before the Tetractys manifests. It's a circle around it, right?
And there is a deeper question here, because on a sort of a basic level, it's like saying, well, okay, there are these forms, and from these forms emerge the physical world. But on a deeper level, are we causing the physical world to emerge through these models, through our consciousness? That especially when you start to think of the whole multiple universe theories of the multiverse and things. What is causing what? And this question sometimes it kind of eats at me. It kind of bothers me a little bit. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And I mean, just a silly example, but from general relativity, I think it was, this idea of black holes. And for Einstein, he thought it was an anomaly in the math. And eventually, this thing becomes something that people begin to look for, and then we find them. I always found that very curious, very curious.
And that may be entrances to other universes.
Yes. But are we causing these things? Is our consciousness is everything evolving together? You see what I mean?
Right. Chicken and the egg. Yeah.
Yes.
Get you.
And I always thought that was just a little bit strange, you know? There are those things in math sometimes that you wonder, is it really? Because, you know, from the Darwinian point of view, why would a monkey have the potential to be able to understand the universe to that extent? So you say, oh, well, you know, we got lucky. Or is it we are created? You know, that's a different question. We should probably leave that for another day. Yeah.
I agree with that we got lucky. If luck is analog to fire.
Great point. I just want to make one point here, and this is kind of something a pet peeve of mine. To enchant the world, if we would just teach children math, not as a counting system, but as a system of archetypes.
Yeah.
My God, imagine these kids.
Right.
If we would return the one, we wouldn't need churches, and the people would have a natural spiritual affinity for the universe because they would see. But we teach numbers as an accounting system.
Exactly.
And that's such a shame. It's such a shame.
It is. You know what I usually say? We're soulmates here, because what I usually say is especially, you know, in spirituality, you get all these airheads who have no thought or understanding of, they're actually afraid of numbers and math. And I don't blame them, because the school, and this is what I tell them, the school has treated numbers like the slaughter factories treat animals. It doesn't mean that that's the only value of animals, right?
Right, exactly.
Obviously, and it's the same with the numbers. But they are brainwashed by the slaughter industry, and so they're afraid of numbers, but they should embrace it. I love to, you know, when people like that discover the intuitive aspect of numbers.
Yes.
That's
a great metaphor, too, about the slaughterhouse. That's perfect.
Yeah, I think it expresses how it is. Yeah.
And when we think about music as an expression of number, then when you go back, I mean, I think you'll notice in the film there's a certain affinity for Baroque music in the film.
Yeah, I love it. And that music, oh my God, the numbers.
Oh my God, no. And, you know, if you wanted to solve all the problems in the world, if we just put on all public places for 1 year Vivaldi and Bach, that's it. So every time you're in an airport, a bus station, a supermarket, that would change the vibration of the entire world. I'm absolutely sure of it.
I agree. I mean, it's like Jung. You know, you can't get untouched away from going deep into Jung. It will mark you forever. The same can be said about Bach.
Oh my God. And it just goes deeper and deeper. I remember when I started listening to the cantatas, I was like, oh my God, how did I never know about this? I mean, it touches you in a way that you don't really see how, you know, it's a different level of engagement. I mean, Bach is close to the voice of God. I mean, if you want to listen to what does God sound like? Well, it's pretty close to this.
But ironically, I think wasn't Bach one of the first to change the tuning system up to the modern, or did that come after him?
Well, actually, Bach had his system, and there was, but I believe it was before, wasn't it?
Yeah, I know he used old stuff, but I wonder if I read something. I'm not too on very firm ground here, and musicians among us will probably roll their eyes now. I should know this, but I'd best be asking Joseph Farrell. He's a musician. He would know this. He studied Bach.
Right.
But there is something to be said about the tuning system, because you know probably as well as me that not long ago, 100 years ago, they decided upon this horrible pitch as where they skew they use A to tune after. And if you look at the natural tone system in nature, A is, I think it's 427. But they have decided it should be, I think it's 440 or something.
I believe it's 440. Yeah, I believe it's 440.
Yeah. And the problem then is that all instruments, when they tune after that, everything will come out of tune with the real tones. Now, obviously, you only have to click once on Google and you'll find a million conspiracy theories about this. But it needn't be sinister. It can just be ignorance. It can be coincidence, whatever. But no matter the intention, the result is that most music today is out of tune with the natural frequencies, the pure frequencies, I mean.
Okay.
Like C is supposed to be 256 hertz, then 512, then 1024, etc. It is doubling all the way, right? But that's not what's going on in music, unless a musician is aware of that, which some are, and then they try making music after the real, and that gives interesting results, my friend, as we can imagine if what we're both claiming is true, that music is, and you call it what, the first manifestation of the divine, was that it?
Yeah, I mean, that's what I see, and it's that bridge between the world of archetypes and the material world, and in that space. Now, there is one interesting thing. For tuning systems, there's this problem of what do they call it? The Pythagorean scent. No, that everything's always going to be off.
Yeah.
And there's one very interesting thing. I've never said this anywhere, so I'm not sure. I'm not that I've discovered it. But if you look at the problem of 360 degrees and 3 on a circle, we have those 5 extra days.
Right.
And I think for a lot of people, I mean, how beautiful would it have been if we had 360 days? But something's a little bit off. And do you know that if you do that ratio of 5, how off is 365 to 360? And the Pythagorean scent in music, it's very, very close. And I've always found that very curious. And no one has mentioned this. Because it shows that it's almost that Gnostic idea that it's almost right, but it's not quite right.
Right. No, but I mean, there's mythologies and notions about something happening to our solar system and the Earth, so that the Earth came out of tune, so to speak. Because you could say that the planets sing the music of the spheres, etc. Right? Schumann resonance, all that stuff, so if that's true, then the tone of the planet would change, and so would also, because this is all related, the spin, the distance to the sun, all that stuff. So if that happens, we will get a different amount of days.
Right.
And we know about the golden age notion, when the sun, the seasons were permanent and everything was harmony.
Exactly. And does that work into that whole